All right, so let's not waste time. I am going to kick this off. My name is Ben LaMothe. I lead the Pardot practice at BDO Digital. I also got the golden hoodie at Dreamforce last year, which is super exciting. Feel free to follow me on Twitter at Ben LaMothe, or if you want to also follow me on LinkedIn, I'm also pretty active there as well. Um, and I will let Laura introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Lara Black. Name spelled weird, but pretend there's a U in it. I have been in the Pardot world since 2011, spent a couple years as a consultant. I am back client side, a marketing operations manager, and also Pardot user group leader here in Austin, and just really want more people to like Pardot and know how to use Pardot. So excited to hear when people are taking their tests and they pass. Please let us know. We really enjoy hearing that sort of stuff.
She's also a Salesforce MVP. Don't let her forget to say that.
Oh, yeah. MVP for Pardot community support. So
Yeah.
uh, all the good
All
things.
right. Well, we have this is the exam guide that we're basing all of this off of. If you want to put this, let me see, I can see if I can. Oops. Nope. I'm going to back up. Let me back up. How do I back up? Back up. Nope. Well, I screwed that up. So this is. Can you? Yeah, thank you. That's what I was trying to do. I'm an idiot. Thank you. Um, So what we're going to be talking about today, or at least I'm going to be talking about, is the Pardot Engagement Studio. So is there? I'm like forgetting how I can go back in this once I'm in presenter view. Anyways, so Engagement Studio, it's worth 17%, and the two things that you need to be able to do successfully is distinguish between the different components of an engagement program, and then also be able to explain the process of updating an engagement program, including its assets. So engagement program is probably the most powerful part of the Pardot Lightning app, and it covers a lot of ground. And I like to tell people it kind of unifies all of the individual parts of Pardot, like emails and forms and landing pages and assets and all these things. They all kind of come together to be usable in a single in a single template or a single not template but kind of workspace. All right, so this is the actual Engagement Studio itself. So when you navigate to the Pardot Engagement Studio in the Lightning app by going to um, automations is one way to get there. There's a couple other ways, but the way that I tend to go is let's go to automations and then um, click Engagement Studio from there. Um, Once you get there, there's a button on the right that you are able to that says Create Engagement Studio, and once you do that, um, it's going to then ask you these questions. So every Engagement Studio must be named. This is an internal name. It also must have a folder. It's going to autofill with a uncategorized slash engagement programs folder. If you have more comprehensive foldering in your system, then you would click this and select that folder. The description area here is for internal descriptions, just so others know what this engagement studio is for. It can be blank. It doesn't. It can be blank. It um, doesn't have to have any information here. And prospects are pushed through the engagement studio by virtue of being a member of the recipient list. So you see here it says recipient list and suppression list. Recipient list, you can add several lists here. Just keep selecting lists and they'll keep populating. And then similarly with suppression list, it works the same way as with an email suppression list when you're sending a list email. So how it would work in terms of Engagement Studio is that you would this acts as a filter for to prevent people from entering the Engagement Studio who are on both the recipient list and any of the suppression lists that you select. The recipient list, also something worth knowing is if you were to use a dynamic list as a recipient list, the the way that with the way that dynamic lists work, it it basically, your membership in a dynamic list is dependent on whether you meet or do not meet the criteria for that dynamic list. So if you meet the criteria, you're added to the list. The moment you stop meeting that criteria, you're removed from that list. That extends into the engagement studio. So let's say you are on the recipient list, you meet and you're receiving emails, you're part of this engagement studio because you meet the criteria of the dynamic list. You get 2 emails in, and then somehow you stop meeting the criteria of the dynamic list that you are that puts you in this engagement studio. If you only get 2 emails and then come email 3, you're no longer a member of this dynamic list. You are also no longer a member of this engagement studio. So the list membership is crucial because it's what determines whether or not you continue to be a part of this engagement studio. Um, and you can, obviously it's not just dynamic lists, you can add static lists as well, but the dynamic lists have that little caveat of adding and removing people dynamically by virtue of whether or not they're a member of that of the list that is being used for the recipient list. There is also 2 checkbox here. One is to yes, Natalie, that's true no matter where they are in the engagement studio. And Laura, just keep me honest. I'm like 98% sure that that's right, but I've also been disproven by things I thought were supposed to happen a certain way.
Yes,
But
when somebody, if you're using a dynamic list, if somebody drops off your dynamic list, that's the recipient list, they will just drop out of the engagement studio wherever they were, full stop, they go no further. If you
yep,
add them back to the dynamic list, they will pick up right where they left off.
that was the next part of it that I wanted to make sure that I understood correctly. So that is a cool part. So if they suddenly become part of it, then they're like, okay, now they were on email 2 of a 4 email cadence, but they drop before email 3, they'll just now receive email 3. They'll basically be put right back in. There's 2 checkboxes here: send emails during business hours only, and allow prospects to enter the program more than once. Send emails during business hours only. This is what determines if so. Not every engagement studio will have emails. Will have outbound emails. You can also just use it for internal emails or for complex automations. But if this is a engagement studio that is sending outbound emails, you check this box if you want to restrict when these emails will send. So, as an example, if you were to have a email, like a 4 email cadence, and you want to send an email, but you only want emails to be sent during normal business hours. You don't want someone who is processed through the engagement studio at like 3 in the morning local to proceed to the next step and receive an email from you at 3 in the morning. If you want to restrict that and say, okay, they process at 3 in the morning, but I only want emails to send starting at 9 a.m. between Monday and Friday, starting at 9 a.m. Um, during the week. So if they process, for example, at 3 in the morning, they will be held in that step until 9 a.m. rolls around, and then they'll receive the email. So that is what allows you to set that kind of termination. Say, I want email to start Monday 9 a.m., Friday 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., Monday through Friday. Emails will only send during those times. So if someone processes on Saturday morning, the email will be held until Monday morning. If you don't, if that doesn't matter, if you're fine with emails being sent midnight, 10 a.m., Saturday, Sunday, whatever, don't check that box. That will allow emails to send. If there's emails in the engagement studio that are being sent out, um, it will send regardless of the time of day or the day of the week. And this cannot be modified later on. So this is the determinant for the entire engagement studio. So if you have an email that you say, oh, email, let's say you get the email 3 and you're like, wait a second, I email 1, email 2, that's great, let's send it whenever. But email 3, I need to make sure to send Monday through Friday between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. You're not able to make that change on a per email send basis. This informs the entire Engagement Studio's behavior around outbound email. And the next part here is allow prospects to enter more than once. And I decided that I should probably kind of chunk that out as a specific part of this. So there's plenty of use cases where someone is going to enter an engagement studio and need to come back again. The kind of out of the box use case is that that they go through an engagement studio once and they're done. But there are plenty of scenarios where this is a recurring engagement studio for specific purposes like a donation, or and every time that someone sends a donation or every time someone makes a purchase, you need to make sure that they receive this cadence of emails. In that scenario, you can allow people to re-enter, and you can set the criteria for re-entry. So if you check the box that says allow prospects to enter more than once, you can then set the number of days before eligibility to re-enter. The minimum number of days is 1. You can't set 0. So you have to set minimum 1 day to re-enter, and you can either let them re-enter a bunch of times in perpetuity, or you can say, okay, I only want them to be able to re-enter 3 times. After the 3rd time that they've been through this, they don't need to receive these emails again. It's too redundant. It doesn't matter. But you have the ability to make that distinction at the engagement studio level when you're creating it. When you're building it, you can say, I only want they can re-enter, but they have to wait 24 hours, or and they can only re-enter 3 times, or they can re-enter 100 times. It doesn't matter. Something else that's important to know is that there is reporting that's available on engagement studios. So this is what a report looks like and I'll show you this when I'm going through the walkthrough of Engagement Studio, but this is just for future reference when I do that walkthrough. There is a tab for that's called reporting, and when you click that, this is what you're able to see on each of the email send actions within your Engagement Studio. It's okay reporting. It's not great. Um, it definitely leaves a lot on the table in terms of what it can do. So you would not be wrong to be underwhelmed by this. It gives you a lot of 30,000 feet view of performance, but it doesn't really give you much that you can use beyond just seeing at a glance how many people made it through here, what's the CTR, etc. You can go and get this data in a more granular way if you did an email template report. You'll be able to see it, but it's not necessarily going to give you this at this specific entry point or the specific email send at this point in this engagement studio. It doesn't give you that same view. Um, you are able there's this thing called versions, and so the reason why this is called versions, this is confusing for some people. Whenever you anytime you pause and and every time you pause an engagement studio to make a change, for example, and then restart it, that is considered a new version of the engagement studio. It doesn't necessarily change what's sending or anything like that, but it basically a time-stamped version of this engagement studio. So when you click this drop down, it's going to ask, okay, do you want to see if something changed with this specific email send in this engagement studio? Do you want to see all versions, or do you want to only see the first version before you stopped it and changed it? It's it can be a little confusing, and it doesn't it's not terribly intuitive, the what or the why or what it is. So hopefully that helps, what it is that the versions mean. You are able to see the number of prospects. If there's prospects that are currently waiting to be processed through this step, it tells you the aggregate number that have been sent starting from, in this case, December 9th, the number of opens, the average click-through rate, number of opt-outs, and the bounce rate in aggregate. So this did not come through as I was hoping it would. So this is a kind of at a glance look at the different parts of an engagement studio. There are actions, triggers, and rules. So an action, as you can see, is going to be add to list, adjust score. There's going to be action verbs, going to be do something. And you've got a list that you can scroll through. to make selections. The next is a trigger. These are obviously green, and these are actually going to be evaluation steps. So it's going to say, it says custom redirect, but when you add this to an engagement studio, it's going to ask you, like the actual adding of it is, did they click the custom redirect? Did they open the email? Did they complete the form? Did they download the file? Those are the questions that are being asked in that trigger step, and there are yes no paths. And the third one here is called rules. So this is looking at specifics of this prospect within either Salesforce or Pardot. So it's going to ask, and this is like triggers, it's going to be an evaluation step. Is like are they assigned to this specific Salesforce queue? Yes or no? Are they assigned to this user? Yes or no? Are they a member of this list? Yes or no? Pardot campaign? Yes or no? Etc. You can use what are called complex rules. This is a newish feature. I don't know if it's so new that it won't be on the exam, but it's good to know just in case. And I'll walk through this a little bit in the demo. But a complex rule is criteria driven, or you can kind of stack it, saying for example, you could say, I want this to look for a prospect whose grade is at least this and is a member of this list. So you can add additional conditions, but instead of just one, you can stack them all into a single node. So as I mentioned here, the blue node is the action node. They're pretty straightforward. They let you do something, send an email, change a field. Then these are examples of some of the actions. So when someone hits this level, hits that specific action node, it will take an action. It'll add to this list, send this email. You can within this node set what is kind of effectively kind of a wait step, or like a delay, where you can wait to take this action, or you can wait to evaluate to take this action until after a certain period. Um, and you would use that because you're listening for other things that have happened upstream. Like you sent an email, and now you need to wait. You want to wait for 2 days and then take these actions. So if you need to create some artificial time, some space in your studio, you can. Um, and that Yeah, you're exactly right, Laura. That's a engagement studios are wonderful for building complex automations that have either no outbound email send, or only produce internal email sends. Um, this is a trigger, so this is what I mentioned before, where it's listening for an event to occur within a specific time frame. So when it says specific time frame, time is kind of a complicated, or can be kind of a complicated kind of concept in Engagement Studio. So it's either, you have two options. It's either in the last, or no, it's not. Help me out here, Laura. I always forget. It's the has happened.
From when
It's
they started the engagement program. So they were added to recipient list, the program was turned on, and they started flowing down it. So these triggers look back to the time they're in the engagement studio. They won't look
Does
back
it?
to.
I thought it looked back to the time from reaching that step.
No, so it's a technicality. It won't really show up on the test, but so for example, some people want to put everyone in an engagement studio and set this trigger for 365 days. And if they fill out a form in that time period, then do this. And like, technically, sure, you could do that. But if somebody filled out the form before they join the recipient list, they'll just sit on this trigger for a year before going down the no side, because it doesn't look to before they joined the engagement program.
Yeah, because like how I thought it was like, if you're listening for an email open, saying, because there's two ways. It's either up to it's either it's not up to, but it's
a wait up to X days. So like wait up to 7 days. And if they take the action within 7 days, they go down the yes path. Like, so if they do the action on day 5, they'll go down the yes path on day 5. If they don't do the action when the time expires, they'll go down the no path, which is on the left. That's why I'm making little charts.
Yeah.
But technically, it's like you could set an action, a blue icon of send email on day one, and then like further down, like skip some other steps and then set a trigger looking at that email, which was long ago. And it'll actually like it's not necessarily like 7 days from when they land on the step. It's like they have 7 days for this to have happened, but it could have happened. It's a very nebulous thing. And honestly, you won't
Yeah.
get sort of question that deep of a question on your exam. But yeah, technically it does look back to, did they do this action from when they started the program or not? So in the event of an email link click, obviously they can only have clicked on the email from the time you sent them the email. If you never send them the email, they'll wait the full 7 days or whatever and then go down the no path because they never sent the email. So you can't have had that thing happen to them.
Yeah. Because there's like there is one where it says wait 5 days, and then, or it says wait
Yeah.
up to.
Yes. And that's these green ones. The green ones have wait up to or full on wait. And so I do have a blog post I wrote when I was a consultant about it. I'll dig it up. But it's basically like you don't they have up to this number of days to have taken this action. And it's not a cut and dried, like when they land on this step and then start counting. It's technically when they joined the program. It's a very niche knowledge that like was dropped in the B2B chatter community. The important point of the wait up to step is, have they done the action, yes or no? If they do it before the time expires, they'll move down the yes step sooner. And if they don't do it at all, they'll wait the full amount of time and move down the no step.
Yeah, because I always thought it was like if it's up to, so like the last wait, I think it's like up to 7 days, and so it'll basically keep the door open for 7 days from hitting that step. And
Yes.
if it happens after the 7 days, then they
Yeah,
get
you
sent
don't
down the
go
no
back
path.
in time. Like, so the flow of an engagement studio, when you do the demo, it is always easier to visualize this, but it's a top-down flow. People always flow top to bottom. So let's say you send an email and then you have a green step that says, wait up to 7 days. Did they click a specific link in this email? Yes or no? Well, if they go at the end of 7 days, they go down the no step because they haven't done the action. Well, what if they open the email and click it on day 9? Well, they're dedicated on the no path now. They're not going to go back in time and go up above and fall down the yes path, because you're measuring, did they do this action within this time period? They landed on the steps. Did they do an action? And if yes, move them down the yes path faster. If they don't do it within the time zone, then they move down the no path. But you could, like, if you fumble your email building or copy and paste triggers from the wrong steps, you could do things in the wrong order. And like an email they previously clicked, you could be listening for it way down here, and they clicked 2 weeks ago, but they moved down the yes path. Like it's just a kind of fuzzy thing. We're getting like really into the weeds of stuff that really won't be on your test, and most often doesn't happen unless you fumble something pretty fun.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
probably not.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a probably, yeah, you're right. Probably too in the weeds, but good to know for sure. If you are if for just knowing how time works, and there's entire like blog posts and there's stuff like that kind of go into this in a lot of detail. The third part of this, as I mentioned earlier, these are rules. So rules look for a specific criteria or values in the system over the life of the prospect. Rules don't wait for something to happen. Instead, they check current data. So it's going to say at the point that they hit this rule, are they a member of this list? Are they do they have this value in the field? Are they a member of this campaign? Is their score at least this? Whatever it is, it's looking for at that moment in time, do they meet the criteria of this rule? Not looking backwards to at any point in time in the past, did they at one time were they at one time part of this queue? Um, that's important to know, because if you're, and it's not a like, there is no programmatic like, well, they should be part of this, or this, it would make sense if they had this field value. It is whatever it is, do they meet the criteria today at this exact moment in time that they hit this rule? Yes or no? And like I said, and I'll do the demo, you can stack your rules. This is a newish feature where you can add a bunch of rules, instead of having like to stack them out as like kind of like a daisy chained like just tree, you can stack them together where you're looking for all of this criteria before advancing them down the yes or no path. And we've arrived at the walkthrough demo part of this. So you see, I've got all these random engagement studios in here. This is one of my many favorite demo orgs. So this is what I was talking about, and I'll try and zoom in a little bit so everyone can see. So this is what you see with the engagement studio. So I'm going to name this test engagement studio for exam prep. Notice the folder is here. It's going to ask me where I want to put it. This will only populate. So let's say I've got Pardot training. It's called 21, but whatever. You can add your description here if you need to. You have a bunch of lists that you can use. So if I say list 1, list 2, list 3, list 4, whatever, I can then say, but I want to make sure that they're not on this list or this list. And then here is what I was talking about, where you have your send list during business hours only. When I check this box, it asks me, okay, cool. Well, what are your business days? Are you a Monday through Friday company? Are you a Tuesday through Thursday company? What works for you? And then it's going to ask you, when does the day start? Not when do you want this email to send? That's important. It's when does the day start? Because emails are not going to send at 10 a.m. immediately. That's when they become queued to be sent. So they may not send until like 10:10, 10:15, whatever. And then when does the day end? This is the cutoff. Emails should not be sent after 4 p.m. local or whatever time zone that you select. So it is not so this is not going to be looking at the time zone that for your account. That's what's pre-populated here. So you can select that, but you can also say, nope, this is an email that's going to customers who are in Argentina. So I want this to work based off of current time in Argentina. So 10 a.m. Argentina to 4 p.m. Argentina. And then this is where I was saying before, allow prospects to re-enter, saying unlimited re-entry. And then what I said before about a minimum of 1 day. Say, okay, cool, save. This is what you see next. So now it's asking you to build. You would click this little plus icon, and it asks you, what are you trying to do? You want to send an email? Is this a trigger or is this a rule? Typically, it's going to be an action. Next, you see all of your actions that are available to you. Remove tags, notify user, etc. Let's say that I'm going to send an email. I've got a bunch of email templates from previous tests. So I'm going to say, I want to send this one. It's now going to ask me, when do I want to send this email? Is it as soon as they hit this step, send the email? Do I want to wait 2 days before sending this email? Or does it need to send on a specific date? A warning about this is if you set, like I would caution you against mixing and matching dates with kind of programmatic days, because you run the risk of one overlapping the other or one missing the other. And then suddenly the send date versus the evaluation days don't match. And that will cause the engagement studio to effectively stop working, and it'll start skipping steps because it's not meeting the email send criteria. So I would encourage you to either to stick to it consistently. If this is date driven, use dates for everything. If this is more like kind of ongoing, use your days, use a wait 2 days before sending this email. Now the next step is to say, okay, now I need to listen. I want to say, for anybody who clicked any of the links, so if I want to say any of the links in this email, I want to evaluate up to 5 days. I want to give a person 5 days from receiving this email. I want to give them 5 days to receive it and click a link. Versus wait is it's going to hold for 5 days, and then once at the end of 5 days, it's going to release. This is a rolling 5 days, over the course of the next 5 days, anybody who gets processed through this step gets pushed through to the next step. Now it's asking for a yes, no. Say, okay, cool, they clicked on it. Now I want to evaluate something. Saying, okay, great. They evaluated their yes. I have a let's say I have a region field here. I only want to now I need to process people for people who are in this county, and I want to evaluate on that immediately. I can also add a second condition that says, okay, they're in Pinellas County and their score is greater than 50 points. I can change this to, instead of being conditions are met, I can say any are met. So they're in Pinellas County or their score is greater than 50. But in this case, I'm going to say all conditions are met, and it's going to evaluate immediately. So as soon as what this means is as soon as they as soon as they are processed through this step, they immediately get processed to this step, and then are processed immediately down to yes or no based on what the data that's in their record at that point in time. You can now do more things. You can send more emails. You can assign to a specific user saying, hey, this record is now assigned to me, and I want to add them to a Salesforce campaign, which, oh, good, I have some. And I want to use the status of click link. I want that to happen immediately. And then now that this is done, let's say this is a very short engagement studio, I don't need them to do anything else. I can end it for them if I need to. All right, so now that they've done everything I needed them to do, cool, they're done. If they didn't, I can now send another email, say, hey, you didn't do the thing I need you to do. I'm going to send you this email. Wait 2 days between sending and send it, and then just kind of repeat the process. You're able to do testing in your engagement studio by clicking the test tab here, and and here's how that test works. So if I want to test it based on today, begin test, it's going to record the actions over here on the right, the date and so the date that this would have happened. And now it's going to ask me, okay, within the last 5 days, was any link clicked? Yes. Does the prospect match all the following conditions? Yes. Assigned a user, it's added a campaign, and done. So it tells me, okay, how long would this go for somebody who went down the yes path, and when would these things happen? This lets you know, you're able to determine, is this working as expected? If it's not, you can say, okay, I need to go back and fix this. Go back to build and say, I need to fix this because my dates are messed up. I need this to evaluate for longer. And you can keep messing with this and then test it and mess with it and test it. You can also go to activity. This gives you a time-stamped kind of a field history, kind of like in Salesforce, where it tells you when things were started and ended. It says when it was created, at what date, what time, and by who. And if there are starts and stops and starts and stops, all of that will show up in here. When you're ready to start an engagement studio, it now asks you, okay, when do you want to start it? I need to schedule this to send. I need to schedule this to start on Monday at 2:15 p.m. Argentina time. And I don't need this to ever stop, or I can say, all right, this needs to stop on the 27th at 3 p.m. What needs to be known about this is that when you set a start and when you set an end date, I believe, Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, but if it's done, then it's done. So if somebody is in email 2 of a 3 email cadence and the engagement studio is done at 3:30 at 3 p.m. local, the whole thing the lights just turn out.
Yep.
Okay, I figured, but I wanted to make sure. So just be aware that these are hard and fast dates. These are like written in stone. And the use cases vary. So either this is very date driven. So if it's a specific offer, for example, that ends, that's like, it's for like, you're trying to drive people to a event. or you're trying to get people to take advantage of a time-sensitive offer or something like that, that's a scenario where you would use a start and stop. Otherwise, if it's just like an ongoing cadence, you would start it whenever you need to start it, and end it would be never. It would just keep going until you're ready to unpublish it. Once you stop it, if you pause it, it stops. It's frozen.
Yeah. You might pause it. Like I have some evergreen nurtures and I pause them over like the 2 weeks of the Christmas holiday or something like that. And then I just start them back up again. So like I'll schedule them to pause on say like December 21st or something like that. And then when I come back in the office on January 2nd or whatever it is, I'll like start them up again. It varies. There's reasons to pause them because there is no like holiday sending, you know, that you specify in here. So do be aware that your engagement studio, like when it's on, it keeps going, it keeps processing.
One thing I do want to note that I'm realizing was part of this part of the requirements was, so let's back out of this. And I have this email. This email, when I click on this, I can click on it and I can see what it looks like. Obviously, this is a demo email, but oh yeah, I remember when I put that on there. That's funny. So let's say you're like, oh man, this email needs to change. This image should not, this image is out of date, or I have a better one. Do not stop the engagement studio. First and foremost, if it's running, let it run.
Yeah.
What you need to do is go into this email asset, which is going to be in Pardot email, make the changes to this email template. So this is Pardot Training 21. Let's see here. Pardot Training 21. Edit the email template. And be like, all right, wait a second, this email needs to change. So remember, this looks like this now. Just go in here and say, I no longer need this row. Save it. Go into text, sync from HTML, make sure everything is good. Publish a draft. And now, unless I totally just got rid of all my stuff, which I may have. I think I did. Awesome. Oh, yeah. So let's say, let's go back and add this email again, because I didn't save it. So Pardot test email. And now I hover over this, and it's gone. So what I'm saying is that you can make changes to your assets, to your forms, your landing pages, your emails outside of Engagement Studio. Think of them as being kind of mirrored into Engagement Studio in a way. So making all your changes to assets, all your updates to fields, to all these things happen separately. You don't need to pause or end your Engagement Studio to make those changes. All of that can happen separately, and then once you hit publish, that then flows backwards into Engagement Studio, and now it has the updated asset. And I believe that was the end of my Engagement Studio part of this. Let me just make sure. I don't think there's anything else in here. Yep, and now we're on to Laura. So I will stop sharing and pass the baton.
Okay, 1 second. So Ben did the awesome demo. You all know that I am a big fan of slide decks, let's say. All right, everything shared okay? Okay, so lead management, Pardot's calling it lead management, or I should say the Salesforce certification is calling it lead management. I don't particularly like this name because it's more than just the concept of like, I have a new lead, I need to get it to sales. This is really about like segmentation lists, automations, but lead management is much catchier. It's a pretty weighty part of your exams, 24%, and I think you need like 72% to pass. So if you bomb this section, you have to get basically everything else right in order to pass this test. So do understand what goes on with all these things. And then I've got some links that I'll share out, or Ben, if you can drop some of them into the chat as we go. I can't see chat because of how I've shared my screen. But anyway, so lots to go in here, very wordy, but basically what we're going to cover is Pardot's concept of score versus grade, what Pardot calls segmentation, which is made up of lists and dynamic lists versus static lists, segmentation rules, and profiles. And profiles is actually grade. So we're actually going to jump around a little bit. We're going to cover automation rules. We're going to cover completion actions, page actions, and custom redirects. So like I said, this is going to not so much cover how to push a record from Pardot into Salesforce as a new lead, but do understand that these completion actions, these automation rules, you can even do it with Engagement Studio. You can do that action with any number of these automations. So I'm not going to help you decide when and where to push a lead into Salesforce, but these are the tools that'll help you along the way. So first concept, and you, as a Pardot admin, you probably see score a lot. Pardot may have sold your sales leadership or your executive leadership on the concept of grade when they bought it, but grade is highly underused. So if you haven't touched grade, don't be ashamed. You're not alone. A lot of companies don't touch grade. But to pass the specialist exam, you will want to know what is the difference between score and grade and why one changes versus another. So score is literally activity. It measures how interested a prospect is in your company. So an anonymous visitor is on your website, surfing around pages, and then filling out forms, and they become a known prospect. And then you send them emails, and they engage with your emails. Those are all activities. Those are things that show that they're engaging with your brand, your website, maybe your social, if you're using Pardot assets in social. So they're probably researching you because they probably want something you have to sell. So this is, like I said, how interested a prospect is in your company. And maybe you're like, okay, that's great. I want to hand over all of these leads. They're all leads to sales. And I would say, sure, if your sales team is like desperate for leads, but honestly, you'll probably get some pushback that all these leads are crap. Because sales, as much as they say, I want more leads, they don't want crappy leads. They want leads that they can actually close, right? And that's where grade comes in. So grade is demographic, firmographic information. It measures how interested your company should be in a prospect. And in theory, there's a nice intersection, right? There's how interested a company is in your company and how interested you are in them. And you're going to, find the sweet spot of both of them and then pass them over to sales, and sales is happy and you're happy and everything. So when I say demographic, firmographic, this is data that doesn't change much. So it's things like their job title. Well, they might get promoted, but they're probably going to stay in the same department. So breaking their job title down into their department, like are they executive leadership, like a CEO, or are they a VP of marketing and they're in the marketing department, things like that. But also their level of job title. Are they a vice president versus an associate, right? Which one has buying authority? And then things like their company size, which may vary from company to company and maybe based on revenue or maybe based on number of employees. Things like location. Like my current company, we only really sell in the US and Canada, but we're looking at expanding into other markets. But right now, like another market, even in North America or even in South America, we can't do business there. So I'm not going to grade leads from those countries very highly, unfortunately. In a year, that might change and my grade measurement changes. But in general, the grade are things that make your sales team members like really excited to talk to a new prospect or a returning prospect. But the thing is that with this talk about score and grade and finding the sweet spot, sure, you could do an exercise of grading all of your prospects in your database. Well, maybe some of those prospects are from 2010. That's 12 years ago now. And suddenly you do this grading thing and you give your sales team a report and we're like, hey, look at these like grade A through F is your grade, US grading system. Maybe you give some of these like, here are these leads and they're a letter grade of an A, which is really great, but they're old. They've been in Salesforce since 2010 and haven't done anything. Sales would probably not be happy about reaching out to them because it's a cold outreach in spite of them fitting the profile of your best potential customer, right? So that's where finding the sweet spot of a company who's interested in you and you are a prospect who's interested in you and showing activity by engaging with your things and you wanting to engage with the prospect because they have the right profile, those things should come together to some sort of intersection. And it's not cut and dried. It's not like everybody with 100 points and everybody with a letter grade of C. Maybe it's like a letter grade of a C is an okay prospect, but they have 250 points to get passed over to sales, where a letter grade of an A is a great prospect, but an activity score of 50 points passes them over to sales. You have to decide and experiment and see what works and get feedback from your sales team to see what works. So as I noted, score being a measure of activity or engagement with your things, score is increased. You can set up rules to decrease score, but you really won't come across that on your exam. So I'm not going to cover that. But generally, your score is increased by a prospect who engages with your Pardot assets. And those assets are things like your website forms, landing pages, if you've uploaded PDFs to Pardot and they're stored on Pardot. Cookie prospects who download those files get points for them. Opening and clicking tracked links in Pardot emails you send them. If you do webinars, then you can connect the webinar connectors, the official webinar connectors like WebEx and GoToWebinar and ReadyTalk. Those official connectors can add points. And then also if the prospect is already cookied and they're like on your website clicking around, you can see they get X number of points per web page visit. And then you can set up page actions for certain pages and give them either like higher points or lower points, things like that. We'll talk about page actions later. So to find the Pardot master settings about score, it's under Pardot settings. So this is available only to admins. If you're a marketing user, you probably don't have access to see this. But a Pardot admin just goes to Pardot settings, and then under the left-hand tab, it says automation settings and then scoring. And I'm going to show you in a second, like what things can be scored on. But I think I killed my page. Sorry about that. I'm looking for a page that isn't there anymore. I was trying to show you it's on this page here. So down on the bottom portion of the page, it says scoring rules. It says scoring categories at the top. I'm not going to talk about scoring categories, but the scoring rules in the middle of the page say things like a custom redirect click is worth 3 points, an email open is worth 0 points, a file access is worth 3 points. So out of the box, Pardot comes with these scores that are already set. And this is how you change them. So one thing that you should definitely know about the Pardot scoring, when you change these master settings and you say, let's say an email open is worth 0 points, but now you're going to change it to be worth 1 point, but only when they open the email the very first time. So if they open an email 5 times, they're not going to get 5 points. They're only going to get 1 point for the first email. If you change that, it's retroactive. So anybody who has ever opened any email is going to have their points changed. So be aware that this is retroactive. And as you're making these edits, you're going to see this thing at the bottom, what is changing. So I have, for example, some automation rules that are affecting my grading. And so Pardot is being helpful and be like, hey, make sure you understand this. This might be affected when you make these scoring rules. Something that the arrow on the top is pointing to is that when you make an edit and say, I'm going to say that an opportunity lost is not worth negative 100 points, it's worth 0 points. It doesn't change their score if they lose an opportunity. When I change that, Pardot's going to change that number where it says affects 0 prospects. And so maybe you have 700 people who have lost opportunities, and it won't tell you who they are, but it'll tell you the number that's going to be affected. And that's what I mean when I say these prospects are going to have their scores change and it's going to be retroactive. Because maybe one of those prospects has had 3 opportunities and all those opportunities have been marked lost. So they're negative 300 points. When I change this opportunity lost to 0, they're going to be reset to 0 points, not negative 300, right? So it is retroactive. So do understand that. Here are all the items that you can score in Pardot. So I showed you briefly this screen. These are all the items that show up on here. There are a couple of kind of deprecated things. One of them is site search query. This is a deprecated feature, but it is listed in your scoring items. You really won't be asked what are the default scores for these things. So for example, the default score for Pardot form submit is 45 points and it's -5 points on a form error. You won't be asked that level of detail, but you might be asked about, yes, this is retroactive. So do keep that in mind for your exam. And then when it comes to understanding, like, I'm changing the score on a landing page, but I'm not changing the score on a Pardot form. If you remember last week, I talked about reporting and I said, know what's going to change. What is your outermost Pardot element? If it's a Pardot form that's iframed onto your website, what's the outermost Pardot element? Well, it's embedded in your website, but that's not a Pardot thing. So the form is where the reporting happens. If it's a landing page where you went through the landing page wizard and on step 2 of the wizard, you embedded a Pardot form, they fill out that on the landing page. Well, there's a form, but the Pardot landing page is wrapping around it. So the scoring change is going to happen on the landing page score. So when you are on this page and you're saying change the score for a landing page submission to be worth 10 points, it's no longer 45 points, it's 10 points. You're going to have scores recalculated only in the landing page thing, not in the form thing. So in most cases, best practice is going to be make your forms, form handlers, landing pages worth similar amounts of points. But that's not hard and fast. But just do understand, if you change a score on a landing page and you don't change it on a form, how that affects when somebody submits a form. Links here to, there's a whole Trailhead module about using scoring. And there's some help articles about what happens with scoring and how you can customize scoring rules. So I want to dive into profiles. So remember I started off talking about score being activity and profile being a grade. So Pardot calls it a profile. It's basically how close is this person to the profile of our best potential customer? Do they have the right job titles? Like, we sell software that's relevant to marketing teams, not software development. We sell, widgets that are useful for facilities operations. Like, we sell GPS units for fleets, and we don't care about somebody who's in marketing. We care about people who are on the ground, right? So do they have the right profile of people who will actually buy your product? Do we sell, something to sales departments, but this person is an accountant at this company? Well, they probably aren't the actual person buying the product, right? So you're going to create a profile of your best potential customer, and then you're going to use automation rules to automate increasing and decreasing the grade via automation rules. So making a profile is one thing until you actually automate it with automation rules. It doesn't do much for you. And grade, like I said, it trips up a lot of people, and a lot of people don't use it because it is confusing. But in general, grades range from an A+ to an F-. And again, this is US letter grade. So A, B, C, D, F are your general grade categories. Every prospect begins at a grade of a D, which is, if you're in the US and you went to school, you're like, oh, a C is like the average. Well, we're trying to make people really look good. So everybody starts at a letter grade of a D, and you can increase or decrease grades in 1/3 increments. So it's 1/3, 2/3, or 1 full letter grade that you can pick how much they'll jump. So maybe for your company, you want to hand off over to sales people who are in a pretty good quality candidate, and you want them to have a letter grade of a B- or higher. So you need to get them up from a letter grade of a D up 5 1/3 increments, right? And that's what this middle column is telling you, is from the D, how many 1/3 increments do you need to go up? To get from a letter grade of a D to a D+ is 1/3 of a letter grade. from a D to a C is 3/3 or 1 full letter grade. So you can jump people in 1 full letter grade increments, but most of the time you might have like 7 different criteria that could jump 1/3 or 2/3. But just think about, in order to get from a D, a solid D to a solid A, you need 9 1/3 increment points, basically. So here's when I said, you might have these kind of buckets. Think about them in terms of like the letter grades of an A. In the light green are, here's your best fit candidates, here's your good fit, here's your okay fit, right? And so these are 3 buckets. And if they get to the full A+, which is 10 increments, that's really astonishingly great. And you should definitely give them to sales if they're showing activity. So I'm going to show you the screens in a second, but basically you're going to go to the profiles section, and each line of criteria has 2 parts. It has a name that you're going to give it, and then it's going to have how much of a grade adjustment it's going to be. And what's kind of confusing is that you can use a single line item of that criteria for the same positive and negative increment. So I can say location is worth 2/3. And when it comes to my automation rules, I can say these countries are worth positive 2/3 of a grade, and these other countries are worth negative 2/3 of a grade. I'm using 2 automation rules to do that, but I can use the same line item profile criteria to do that. It's very confusing. So here's the screen, and under the prospects tab, you go to profiles. And then here is the default profile. So this is the profile that Pardot actually shipped with as an example. You can, on this other screen that I was just on, you can add additional profiles. Out of the box, everybody must have a profile, and they're all added to the default profile. So that's why you see 71,000 prospects in my screenshot here. But I can add additional profiles and like seed some test prospects into my test profile A, and then see what happens when I apply automation rules to them and do some testing and see what happens. So you don't have to use the default profile. You can add additional profiles. You would just need to change people to have those other profiles in order to use them. So here's, like I said, you're going to edit these line items. And when I said there's 2 things involved in each line item, the first one is the name. And these are the default ones that, Pardot shipped with. So they're saying that the company has 50 or more employees. Company size is 50 plus. This is just a free text field. You could call it whatever you want. You could call this like SMB company or something like that. And how much am I going to adjust the grade by? And you can see that my options are 1 full letter grade, 2/3, or 1/3. So that doesn't do you much until you make an automation rule to say, hey, here are the countries or here are the criteria that make this thing happen. So in my example here, I'm showing like the field, the Pardot profile item is their location is United States or Europe. So I'm saying that the prospect default field country is Germany, or their country is United States, and you fill in the rest of the countries that apply. The action is a special automation rule action that says change profile criteria. Which profile are you looking at? You're looking at the default profile. Which line item are you choosing? It's the location being United States or Europe. And I'm saying it matches or it does not match. And this is what I mean by the same line item can either add or subtract, depending on what you say. If it matches, it's going to add 2/3 of a letter grade. If you say does not match, it's going to do negative 2/3. So I would make this automation rule for location being United States or Europe. I would use a second line item that says like location is South America or Mexico. And then I would do like a third one that's like does not match either of these, therefore subtract letter grades. It's very odd. I do highly recommend playing with it. It makes more sense once you play with it. But that's, you're not going to be asked the in-depth details about how to determine a grade, but those are the functions of setting up your profile and how to make the profile automate setting itself with automation rules. We're going to move on to segmentation. And segmentation usually means a list, but there's actually two different things under segmentation. There's segmentation lists, which are your static and dynamic lists. And then there's a feature called segmentation rules. And I'll be honest that I don't use segmentation rules very often. I tend to use automation rules more. But probably segmentation lists I use, almost every day I'm making a list of some sort. So when you talk about a segmentation list in Pardot, it really comes down to what kind of list are you making? Are you making a static list or are you making a dynamic list? A static list, when you make it, is completely empty, and you must manually intervene to make a prospect join the list or be removed from the list. And by manually, I do mean you can go to each individual prospect and say add to list, or you can make changes en masse via like automation rules or by import, or you can do it in Engagement Studio, or you can do a table action and say all these checked prospects, add them to a list. But you must manually set something up to make people join that list. And once they're on it, they're on it. They don't fall off of it. But that also means you have to manually do something to take them off of the list. So if you have somebody who should no longer be on this list, you either have to go in and manually take them out, or you have to set up an automation rule or something to remove them from the list. So static list, they will join the list by you doing something, and they will come off the list by you doing something. Dynamic list is automated. So dynamic list is simply a checkbox upon list create. You're going to set up criteria inside the list, and then Pardot just runs continually in the background, automatically adding them to the list when they meet the criteria. And if they no longer meet the criteria, they fall off the list. It's not exactly real time. Nothing in Pardot really is, but it's pretty close. So Pardot's kind of continually running, looking for people to add and subtract to dynamic lists. And so to find segmentation lists, we're going to go to prospects, segmentation lists. And then when you say add new list, you get this pop-up. And here's the checkbox that you would choose for dynamic lists. If you don't want a dynamic list, don't check that box, just fill in the name and hit save. You'll have an empty list. That's all you need to do. But a dynamic list, we're going to check this box and save. And here you get the tab for building. And you have the match all or match any criteria, where same general criteria is their country, United States or Germany. I'm choosing match any, and it flips that little icon in the middle to an or. You aren't going to have people who country is United States and Germany. So if your list turns up with fewer prospects and you think you want to check your criteria again. And then there is a way to like test this and run a preview, but I almost always just run them. So segmentation rules are similar to this view of segmentation lists where you set up your criteria. But segmentation rules have a very limited set of actions, and the actions are only related to segmenting prospects. So literally you go to prospects, segmentation rules, you add a segmentation rule, and you have this section at the top and a section at the bottom for actions, and then you run the segmentation. You can preview it before you run it. I do recommend previewing segmentation rules, because if you set up your rules wrong, you could like add a whole bunch of people to a list and that wasn't what you wanted to do. And there is no real good way to undo that. You have to run another segmentation rule to undo it. So segmentation rules, like I said, I don't use them often, but if it's something where you just need to add them to a list or something like that, segmentation rules are great for that. Automation rules are where the real power is. So something to know about automation rules is you set them up in a similar way where you set up a bunch of criteria and you set up an action on the bottom. Automation rules continually run in the background. They're not exactly retroactive in that most of your criteria is stuff like their country is XYZ, and that is like they are this at this point in time. And if their country changes, like if I move from the US to Canada, like the automation rule isn't going to undo itself. But some of your automation rules can be things like has ever filled out any form. And those are retroactive, right? But in the same point, what they're thinking of is has ever filled out any form is true now, and it's true always in the future. So it's not really retroactive. You can't set up a rule that's like their country was United States and now it's Canada. You can't do that sort of thing. It can only really look at this is true right now. But it does have a very long look back period of, has ever filled out any form or has ever viewed any form, things like that. They're really easy to construct and read. You get these rules and rule groups, and then you perform actions on them, like change field values. And because you can change field values and those values are synced to a lead or a contact record, those changes can affect what's happening in Salesforce. And they can be allowed to repeat or set to do not repeat, similar to Engagement Studio, where you can check a box and say, yes, this is allowed to repeat. It's allowed to repeat as soon as every 24 hours forever, or it's allowed to repeat every 7 days for a maximum of 3 times. You can kind of pick and choose. But setting them up, you go to the automations tab and then automation rules. And then the top section, you have to give it a name, and every name needs to be unique. But what's really nice is a few years ago, they gave us a description box. And then here's the main meat of your automation rules. You set up your criteria. This is this one I was showing you earlier for like their country is these countries and the action is this. You have 36 different items you can set in the rule criteria. So that top part being like prospect default field or prospect custom field or has viewed a form or prospect time. There's 36 different things in there, and you can view that list on there. And then of the actions, there are 25 different actions you can set in the rule actions. So those things can be things like change field value, mark them as unmailable, add them to a list, add a tag. You can see all of those actions there. Completion actions are, we talked about forms, and you can add completion actions to people who fill out your form. You can add completion actions to Pardot assets like page actions, custom redirects, forms. Landing pages will inherit the completion actions when you embed a form on the page. There's 21 different completion actions that you can have. So everybody who fills out a form will have these actions applied to them. So this action is, I set this up in the form wizard. Definitely go watch our video about forms. And you're going to say, like, everybody who completes this form has these actions applied to them. Add to CRM campaign, about the website, contact us form with the status of connected. It can be other things like send an autoresponder email, apply a tag, add them to a list. The important thing is that everybody who goes through this asset has these same completion actions done to them. We're getting a feature in summer 22 release, so actually next month, that's going to be conditional completion actions. If you take your test soon, the conditional completion actions is not on your test. Right now, everybody who goes through these assets or clicks these links and has completion actions applied to them has the same actions applied to them. And there will definitely be questions asking you to decide which feature you'll use to accomplish a task in Pardot. And your choices are going to be things like, do you choose a completion action? Do you choose a segmentation rule? And basically, how do you know which one to choose? And I wrote it all out for somebody who has low sight. We can distribute the slides, but here's the flow chart that Salesforce actually distributes. And it's basically, what is the rule based on? Is it criteria or is it an action? If it's an action, you're going to use a completion action. What is the rule? Is it supposed to do one time only? If the rule is based on criteria, is this supposed to do one time only? And if yes, you're going to do a segmentation rule. And if no, then what is your desired outcome? You want to update them on a list and that's all? Or do you want to fire an action on the criteria? You're going to use an automation rule. So know this, how you're going to choose which of these automation tools to deploy. Okay, page actions are, at the very beginning, Ben talked about applying, our very first session, Ben talked about applying your JavaScript tracking cookie to all of your public web pages. So page actions can help you call out higher value pages or lower value pages and apply things like increased score or certain completion actions on people who visit those pages. You can also set a page action as a priority page, and you don't have to use exact URLs. You can use wildcards. So here's page actions under automations and then page actions. Here's in general what it looks like. At the top, you're going to give it a name and you're going to give it a page URL. And like I said, you can put an asterisk in there. In this example, I'm going to give it 10 additional points for an already cookied person who visits this page. I'm going to give them 10 additional points for visiting this page. And I'm going to call it out as a priority page. And then I can do completion actions. An already cookied person who visits this page can have completion actions applied to them, like add tags to them or something like that. Page actions, the completion actions are not retroactive. So if I visit this page while I'm anonymous, I don't have these things happen to me. If I visit the page and then later fill out a form and get cookied, it's not retroactive. Those completion actions will not apply to me at that time. So just be aware of that. Custom redirects are, think of like Bitly. You know, you want to shorten a URL or something like that. Use these in social or in banner ads. And again, similar to page actions, you can apply completion actions when an already cookied prospect clicks a custom redirect. So under the content tab, go to custom redirects, and you have to give it a name. You have to assign something to a campaign, and then you're going to give it a destination URL. And you know, maybe your destination URL is really long. I'm going to use my tracker domain, which lets me assign a vanity URL. So it's going to be like a very shortened URL, right? And then if you've turned on your Google Analytics connector, you'll get this option to add your Google Analytics parameters. And again, you can add completion actions if somebody is already cookied. They will have these actions applied to them. So let's say that I put out this link, you know, go to PardotPro.com/quick tip. I'm going to use it in a social post. If one of my already cookied prospects clicks that link, they'll have these actions applied to them, right? And that's really it. You're going to see when you save, you get the destination URL, which is something really long and janky. And then you get the tracked URL, which is nice and short. And that's why I'm saying it's like a shortener, right? If you've used the UTM parameters in the building, then the tracked URL, when you click it, it's going to apply the URL, the UTM parameters as you go. It's super fun. So I definitely think you should play with it. That is all of our slides for all of this. I know we are a bit over our time, but it's been a lot to cover. So we appreciate you hanging out with us.
Yeah,
anyway.
absolutely. Yeah, thanks. Thank you for doing all that, having so much detail, Laura. I'm sure that many will appreciate it above and beyond who are on this call as it's discovered by others. But yeah, no, thanks so much. And like we said before, feel free to reach out, let us know if you pass your exam. We'd love to hear it. It's always nice to hear. And I will be sharing this recording. I'm going to email it out to everybody who registered, and I'm going to be going through the attendees, and I have my final 2 certification vouchers to share. And so I will put those names into a randomizer, and I will let the people know after this who won it. And I'm also going to post this post. I'm going to create a blog post with all 3 of the sessions in a single post, so they're all easy to find. Yeah, thanks again for participating. This was a lot of fun. Hope you guys got a lot of value. And yeah, feel free to reach out. Find us on Twitter, LinkedIn, etc.
Yep. And yeah, if there's any like last minute, we're over time, so if you need to jump to meetings, but if there's any last minute demo things or questions about any of the sessions that you want right now, we can hang out for a couple more minutes and do that for you.
Yeah, I do have to go.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so if you're able to hang out, then great. I do have to bounce though. So Thank you, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
So basically, if you have any questions, let me know. I'll give it a minute or so if you want to put something in the chat. But we are over time. Absolutely understand. Sorry. This is the first time Ben and I have done this, but I think we'll probably do it again. And it's a lot to cover. What are wildcards? Okay, yes, that is an excellent question. So a wildcard is, let's say my website has a URL pattern like pardotpro.com/blog, and then it fills in with like a date and then a slash and then, something else, right? So a wildcard means anything after this gets included. So if I do pardotpro.com/blog/*, it means anything that falls inside of that URL gets included in that page action. So everything inside the blog in that example, but not the blog homepage, which is a fun quirk. So let's say you have a section on your website that's like company.com/about us. And then inside about us, you have sub pages that are like leadership and whatever. You could do a wildcard to do all of your about us pages in one group. And that way you don't have to make a single page action for the about us page and our headquarters page and our contact, all of these individual pages that fall inside that same URL pattern. Does that make sense? You can also do page actions that give negative points. So let's say you have a careers section of your website and you want to give them like -25 activity points for browsing in your careers section. Maybe that's something you want to do. So I only showed like applying points for other high value pages, but you could definitely do negative points for pages that like don't indicate real interest. Does that help? All right. And wildcards used on page actions, like if your website has like good SEO practices, like you probably have sections of your website, like your resources library probably all starts off with like company.com/resources and then / like something else long. So you could like group all of your resources pages together, for example. Yeah. Anybody doing Engagement Studio and have questions about it? I can answer deeper questions. Okay, I think we're dropping. Thanks everyone again for hanging out with us. I really enjoy this sort of thing where I get to do questions. Make sure you pay attention to your email. Ben's been sending out the recordings within the next day, depending on how busy he is. It may take him a little longer, but because you RSVP'd to the meeting and you attended, you'll get updates when he sends out the emails. And then, yeah, connect with us on Twitter. I'm PardotPro on Twitter, and Ben is Ben LaMothe on Twitter and on LinkedIn. But thanks for coming. We'll see you next time.